Well, that's Volta, that's V100, and let's go through a couple of quick demos. You know, you guys know that it's a GPU, so although I haven't spoken much about graphics, it is able to do graphics.
Hey guys, Chris here with The Good Old Gamer. So after watching AdoredTV's latest video yesterday, he brought up a couple of points that really stuck with me. And I wanted to go ahead and do some investigating on this information and see what's really going on in the graphics card market. What's interesting is GPU stands for Graphics Processing Unit, and in reality, Nvidia and now AMD are no longer targeting graphics for their graphics cards. And this is one of the big reasons why the market just feels weird here recently, because us as the consumers, the gamers, we are not the target for their architectures anymore. We are now the not even second-class citizens. We're literally the third tier down. The data centers, the Googles of the world, they're number one. These are the primary customers moving forward for Nvidia and now AMD. The reason why this video is being created is because AMD is now throwing their hat in this ring as well. And as a consumer, we are just going to be given whatever these companies want to give us. The performance of Vega coming up and all the leaks and the information that we now have on Vega and the fact that it's being pushed backwards has also led to this particular video, because all this information combined really goes to show that we clearly are not the target market for either of these companies anymore. Whether we care about their graphics cards, like them or whatever, it's not going to matter here in the near future. Now, if you go ahead and take a look at this slide, Adored went ahead and put something like this up in his video. You can see that the consumer market for Nvidia is still the largest market for them. They make the most money off of that. As you can see from the slide, though, the consumer market goes all over the place. Usually first two quarters are much lower, and then the last two quarters of the year are much higher. Now, if we focus in on Q4 fiscal year 2016 and Q4 FY17, you can see that these are the two biggest quarters, obviously, for their respective years. Now, year over year, Nvidia had a 60% gain. This is a huge boost in revenues from this particular segment, a 60% gain year over year in Q4. That's great. Most companies in the world would be extremely ecstatic with numbers like that. However, if you take a look at Q4 16 and Q4 17, and you compare those in the data center market, you see an astronomical 205% increase. Now, this is important because this is the reason why both companies are going to target this segment well over the consumers. Now, granted, even though they're technically generating more revenue from just gamers and consumer-grade graphics cards at this particular point, that is definitely shifting away. As you can see, just 1 year ago, Nvidia made $97 million in Q4, and that is now up to $296 million. And that is in just 1 year. This is clearly the largest growing segment of their business. This is also the highest margin segment of their business. Now we're going to go back in time a little bit and take a look at Kepler. We're going to look at the Tesla K40 Kepler-based GPU. This is essentially a Titan Black or the 780 Ti. If you go ahead and look at the specs, you have the 2880 stream processors, and the big difference is the Tesla card is selling for $54.99. Now, if you take a look at the Tesla K40 and the Titan Black side by side, these are pretty much the same exact die and the exact same GPU as the Titan class GPU, which was originally targeted for the prosumer market, you know, people that didn't want to spend $5,000 on a GPU, but still needed double floating point or FP64 precision. They could get it at about $1,000, which was far more reasonable. As you can see, you know, $5,500 versus $1,000. The Titan was definitely a superior value. Now, if you add in the GTX 780 Ti, as you can see, it's the exact same die as the Tesla K40 and the Titan Black, except they disabled the double floating point precision, as that performance was just completely stripped out of it, which is completely unnecessary for gaming, so it's not really that big of a deal for consumers. But you have to realize that every time Nvidia was selling one of those 780 Ti's, that exact same die could have been used and sold as a K40 for $5,500. So your $700 GPU is nowhere near as important to Nvidia as their $5,500 GPU. And let's say there was even issue with the floating point precision. Instead of selling a Titan Black, they could have sold the Tesla K40. There was no difference between these GPUs. And this led to what happened with Maxwell. If we look at the original Titan X, what they did is they completely eliminated the FP64 double floating point precision out of the GPU entirely. So much like the 780 Ti, this is a neutered down card, and in all honesty, this is now a gaming card. Without 64-bit floating point precision, the Titan class GPUs are just glorified gaming cards. Instead, Nvidia went ahead and got smart and instead launched the Tesla M40. Now, if you wanted to get that same level of performance, you now have to spend a crap ton of money. Obviously, they don't even have the pricing on here this time around, but I would assume it's still somewhere in that $5,000 range. Nvidia prices don't go down, they tend to go up. Regardless, that same Titan X that you were buying before is the same die as this Tesla M40. So the $1,000 GPU that you bought that you thought was super expensive, Nvidia is used to selling those for $5,000 plus. Now, Pascal is completely different. They completely segmented each market. The P100 is now the Tesla, the super high-end GPU, and then you had the GP102, specifically designed for super high-end gaming. The GP102 is just a scrubbed-down version of the GP100. They went ahead and took off, the HBM memory controller and probably some cache and a bunch of other little minor things to shrink it down into a more affordable GPU for the super high-end gaming market. Now, the GP102 can't do any 64-bit floating point precision. It's not designed for that. It is designed as a gaming GPU. So don't let anybody tell you that a Titan XP or Titan X Pascal is some deep learning thing. It's not. It's a gaming GPU. What you have to realize is Nvidia is making so much more money per transistor on this data center market that it's getting to the point where it's almost not even worth their time to sell it to you. Now, this isn't the case right now. Through Pascal and probably through Volta in the next year or two, I can still see the consumer market still being Nvidia's #1 bread and butter. But in the very near future, I predict within 5 years, the data center market will eclipse the consumer grade market. The reason why I'm bringing all this up and showing you all these numbers and all these graphs are, this is the reason why prices are going up, especially on the Nvidia side. Because if they look at cost per transistor, basically that die that they're spending on your GTX 1070, that die could be, used and put into a GPU that they could sell for a lot more money. This is the reason why Volta is coming out at 815 millimeters squared, and it's going to be this weird 12 nanometer process that they came up with. It has HBM2, it's got 20 megabytes of L1 cache. And obviously the new tensor cores. Now looking at Volta, they're looking to take this to the next level. Volta, we would think, oh yeah, it's going to be so much better for gaming and it's going to do this. It's not. It's not even designed for gaming. It has virtually no improvements that I can tell over Maxwell, which is the same as Pascal, for gaming. And the reason why it's going to be faster because it's going to be bigger, it's going to have more cores, and speeds will probably be about the same. So yes, the consumer grade GPUs will technically be faster, but the architecture is not being designed for games anymore. If you remember the clip that I showed you earlier from their conference just a few weeks ago, they're laughing about, oh yeah, graphics cards that run graphics. That's funny, because that's not who they're targeting. That's not where the margins are. You really have to sit down and think about it. Even if you're sitting there with a $1,200 Titan XP at 471 millimeters squared, that's a pretty big die. It's a powerful GPU, but Nvidia is looking at you going, we could just up the die size a little bit and I could sell that thing for $5,000. All those transistors that I pumped into that GPU, we can sell that for a lot more money. Now, they do need our business right now, but in the future, they're not going to. That's why Volta, the main improvement on that is the L1 cache that you can see there, which won't really do much for us as consumers and won't be there. And then the tensor cores. This is the main point of Volta, is the tensor cores, as this is going to be huge for data center, deep learning, AI. for that particular crowd. For me and you, it just doesn't matter. That's not going to be on the gaming class GPUs. The gaming class GPUs will come out well after the data center GPUs, the Tesla GPUs. And in all honesty, I would expect to start seeing Titan class GPUs being the first to launch. You know, your $1,200 to $1,500 GPUs. I expect Volta Titan to be about $1,500 because it is going to be a larger die. Those are going to be the GPUs that, if you're a consumer and you want high-end graphics, that's where Nvidia is gonna kind of want to go. And it's not really their fault. It's because they can get a lot more money from somebody else. And this is the part of the conversation that I didn't quite get, because this isn't a part of the market that I really looked into. Is that there's an entire group of people out there, there's tons of businesses out there that are fiending for these super fast GPUs, so this way they can get a leg up on their competition into these deep learning and AI markets. AI is going to be huge. And while Nvidia is raising prices on the consumer side, and you know I think that that's shitty, I now understand why. Because they have to. They have to justify even building these things for us. Because, like I said, in the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to make a crap ton more money off of these guys than us. Like, we could all go away, and they're still going to be making more money than they are right now. So, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. The downside is that architectural improvements will pretty much benefit the data centers, will benefit these guys. If it doesn't benefit us as gamers, it doesn't matter. It's not going to matter to them. We're going to get whatever it is that they give us. We are literally going to be the third thought in the process. You have your data centers, then you have your professional grade and workstations, and then, you know, whatever they can do to make work for us as gamers, we're at the bottom of the barrel. The reason why that I'm bringing this up now is because AMD is also going to be entering this market. Now, they went ahead and showed off Vega competing against the P100, and at least in the benchmark that they showed, it compared very, very favorably. Now, next to Volta, I assume that it's going to get its butt kicked because Volta is 100% specifically designed to cater to this market. Now, Vega is not 100% designed for it, but I guarantee you is a lot more designed for the deep learning market than it is for the gaming market. This is part of the reason why I think the benchmarks that we're starting to see come out really might be true. Now, I wanted to believe that AMD wanted to compete in the consumer market, but that's because, you know, I don't focus on, you know, what's going on with the rest of the markets out there. And now that I'm seeing the trend as to where things are going, it makes sense for them to go ahead and build the Vega architecture primarily for the deep learning segment, and then however it runs on the consumer grade is however it runs. Now, they still need to somehow be price to performance competitive, and that's the reason for the HBC controller, the high memory bandwidth controller, and Adored goes over that in his video. I do recommend you watch his video. That was more the point to his particular video. My point is that the architectures that both AMD and Nvidia are building from here on out are not geared towards generating faster graphics. If they happen to do that, which they will if they get faster, more efficient, and bigger, which that's just natural progression, that's what we will get. Now, actual architectural improvements to make games run faster or better, that's not going to be their primary focus. We are going to basically get the scraps from the table, whatever it is that they feel like giving to us. This is also the reason why mainstream GPUs are getting much smaller, because they have to justify a much lower transistor count and a much lower investment to be selling GPUs at those prices. $500 or $600, which was kind of the high point. You know, that was the high-end GPU point that I keep bringing up. That's pittance. That's nothing. In all honesty, I would expect to see the X70 GPUs starting off at $500 or $600 in the very near future. Now, getting back to Vega, the reason why I can confidently say that I think that they're primarily targeting the data center is A, they see the margins that Nvidia is getting. B, they know that Volta is going to cost a fortune to build. It's going to be super fast and going to kick the crap out of Vega. I think AMD is aware of that. But AMD can build their GPU a lot cheaper, and it still delivers better performance than the P100. And yes, it'll be worse than Volta, better than the P100, but they could sell it for a much lower price point. And even at $2,000 or $3,000, if they're selling the Vega Founders Edition at that particular price range, that is still a huge margin improvement over what they're used to seeing. For Nvidia, I don't think they're really going to care because I expect the V100 to be somewhere around $10,000 considering how large the GPU die is. May even be more, I have no idea. Once again, I don't even really care, but it's going to be some astronomical money. The point is that Vega will have a place in that particular market. For the people that don't want to spend that insane amount of money on Volta, but can swing, a couple $1,000 for a better than Pascal GPU, that's where Vega would really fit in. Now, if Vega is faster than the P100 in these deep learning applications here, then why are all the benchmarks we seeing that it's not faster in games? Now, this is the proof that's really kind of backing up my whole thought here, is that was where the architectural improvements of Vega were put. They're not really put into gaming. Because if we look at NVIDIA's GCN architecture, it came out and it was slightly better than Kepler. It was just a little bit ahead of that and way behind Maxwell. Once Maxwell came out, which is still the current architecture for NVIDIA. Basically, it was their Sandy Bridge. And Intel's still riding on Sandy Bridge right now, and NVIDIA's going to ride out Maxwell, the same underlying architecture, for as long as humanly possible. And who can blame them? I mean, it's a great architecture. It costs a ton of money to invest and to build this architecture. So until it is no longer competitive or superior to its competition, they're going to stick with it. But back to what I was saying, GCN was a little bit ahead of Kepler and way behind on Maxwell. Now, if we look at it objectively, a 1280 core Pascal chip basically matches a 2304 core Polaris chip. So they're basically identical as far as performance there. Of course, the Pascal chip is a lot faster and Polaris is slower. But if you look at core for core, they're not even close. Maxwell is still well ahead of even the refined GCN architecture. Now, I want to just flat out say this. The information that we have on Vega really isn't confirmed. This is just benchmarks that they have shown us between Doom, Star Wars Battlefront, and now Sniper Elite 4. These are pretty much the only concrete information that we know for a fact that's running on Vega hardware. And there may still be some surprises out there. But if this is true, and this is the true potential of the Vega gaming GPU that we're going to be seeing, we're looking somewhere in between the GTX 1080 and the 1080 Ti level of graphics. Now, this is pretty much the performance level that I was expecting. Now, figuring out Vega's minimums using math video that I did a while ago. Now, granted, this was a flawed video as I did not take into account GPU scaling. Luckily today, we can kind of figure out GPU scaling as it stands here with Polaris at the very least. Now that we have the RX 560, it is literally one half of the RX 570. And I went ahead and took Gamers Nexus's benchmarks here and compared the 560 and the 570 to gauge performance scaling. Now, as you can see here, the performance scaling in DirectX 12 is really good at 85%. So this means in newer games moving forward, GPU scaling with more cores is going to be much better. Now in DirectX 11, it's at 72%. That's not terrible, but it's not great. But since we're moving past DirectX 11, this isn't that big of a deal. Now if we take the math that I figured out in that video, and instead of thinking of it as a bare minimum, but taking all of the Vega improvements, the architectural improvements to make up that extra 15%, at least in DirectX 12, that means the numbers I was coming up with should, in theory, be somewhere as close to Vega performance. And the performance numbers we came up with was in between the GTX 1080 and the Titan X Pascal, which is basically a 1080 Ti. And sometimes it would be closer to the Titan X, and sometimes it'd be further away. And in all honesty, I believe that's where Vega's probably going to end up performance-wise. We're probably going to see it in some titles close to the 1080 Ti or Titan X Pascal. And then in other titles, especially DirectX 11 titles, it's going to be way behind and possibly even being beat by the GTX 1080 in some DirectX 11 titles. But in all honesty, moving forward, DirectX 11 is going to be left behind, but there are a lot of games there that people still want to play. The whole reason why I brought that up is they're showing it faster than the P100 in deep learning computational tasks and slower than the 1080 Ti. Clearly, AMD did not design Vega around gaming. This card is clearly being designed, much like Ryzen. Ryzen is clearly designed for the server market first. It happens to work very well for consumers, but it's not 100% targeted towards the consumer grade market. Ryzen was clearly designed as a server CPU first and then just scaled down to the consumer grade market. They launched it on the consumer market, I believe. First was just to get them out there and get people talking about it. There's a lot more buzz in the consumer grade market than there is in the professional market. It's not like Google has a YouTube channel where they talk about how awesome their new processors are working. Regardless, obviously that's where Ryzen was built for first, and it seems Vega is also heading that direction. Now with Volta also going down that direction of data centers first, then we have our workstations, and then consumers are last kind of approach. I just don't know how much better technology is going to get over time. The only upside is in these giant servers, they're cramming tons of GPUs. Efficiency, especially on the AMD side, is going to have to get a lot better. That's the reason why Pascal is so good, is because they need to be as efficient as possible because of power restraints and heat restraints inside of these giant server racks. So I don't know, guys. That's a lot of information that I just vomited at you. I hope I presented it in somewhat of a coherent manner. This is a lot of information that I just took in, and I'm trying to present it to you with as much data right in front of you as possible. This is a really interesting topic because these companies started making graphics cards, and now they are making AI cards, basically. I would assume that in the near future, they will no longer be calling these GPUs, even though they technically still will be. They will probably come up with another acronym for them, as that's going to be their primary marketing focus, and we're just going to kind of be left out there. We're going to get whatever they decide to give us. The other downside is because there is a market out there. People are willing to pay a lot more money per transistor than we currently do now. This likely means that our prices will go up if there's still a high demand in that particular market. Now, if all the supercomputers out there are full of Nvidia and AMD GPUs and nobody's buying anything, that's when they'll start to trickle all this technology down to us. Because obviously, lower the price, you can find people who want to buy them. But I still see prices going up almost exponentially moving forward here. Like I said, an X70 GPU easily is going to be $500 within the next 3 or 4 years. It's just not worth it to Nvidia and eventually AMD. AMD will eventually make some money. As I said, their Vega GPUs are going to make them a lot more margin dollars than any other GPU that they've really tried to pump out in the last forever. This architecture is clearly good, and it's going to be the budget-friendly alternative to Volta. And that's what they want. They don't want to beat Volta. They want to be the budget-friendly alternative, as there's going to be a market for both of them. And what this will do is bring in a lot of much-needed revenue and margin dollars for R&D for AMD. Now, as Adored said in his video, it's going to take AMD a long time to catch up to Nvidia as far as technology goes. I see that being correct on the data center side, as obviously Volta is going to be introducing tensor cores, and that's going to take AMD at least 2 or 3 GPU generations before they can match whatever sort of technology that is. But on the gaming side, in reality, Nvidia is not really inventing anymore. They don't need to. They can just brute force it with bigger and faster GPUs. And yeah, they're going to be bigger, they're going to be faster, and they're going to be more efficient. So that's all good. But like I said, the innovation, I think, is just going to fall by the wayside. AMD is forced to innovate right now because, well, they're just not competitive. They just aren't as fast. They have to be more budget friendly. They have to have cooler features, more effective in pretty much every respect for people to want to buy them, because they are going to technically be slower. And I don't see Vega being a whole lot cheaper either, considering a GTX 1070 could be had for about $330, and GTX 1080s I'm seeing almost at $400. So, I mean, how cheap can Vega really be? So they have to find other ways to make their GPUs viable for the consumer market, as they don't have the data center market to fall back on yet. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. That's a lot of information. It's a lot to get your head around, but I'm no longer going to really be worrying about consumer grade GPUs. I mean, I'll talk about their performance relative to each other, but it almost doesn't even matter if you buy any GPU, and it doesn't matter who you buy it from, because the PC gaming market is, right now it's a big deal, but like I said, in a couple years it's not going to matter. We will literally be a drop in the bucket. If you look at Intel's revenues, especially on the server side, compared to what Nvidia is making total, Intel's making way more money. And if Nvidia can tap into that level of cash, yeah, it doesn't matter if you buy an Nvidia. Heck, they might just stop selling consumer grade GPUs and focus all their efforts on the data center market. Like I said, I don't see that happening for a long time, but eventually that may be the case, because like I said, massive margins. We're talking thousands of percents in margins versus, 50, 60%, maybe 80%. I don't know what their per GPU margin is, but, on the consumer side, it's generally 50 to 60%. But we're talking way higher on those data center cards there, guys. And that's what AMD is going to start going into. At the end of the day, guys, I have no idea what's actually going to happen. We just have a general idea of where things are starting to go here at this point. It's a little weird seeing graphics card companies no longer really worried about graphics. I do find that personally interesting. That's why I'm making this video. And just kind of wanted to give you guys kind of a heads up of where things are headed at this particular point in time. Who knows where things are really going to end up, but we do know where we're at currently. So hopefully you guys learned a couple things in here. I really want to get your opinions in the comment section below. And as always, if you like this kind of video, please hit that like button, please subscribe, please share with friends. That really helps us out. And if you really want to help support us, you can join us on Patreon by becoming a patron. For as little as only $1 a month, you can really help us out, get some more tech on hands, and we can make higher quality content videos for you guys. Thank you so much for your support, and we will catch you guys in the next video.